When you're young, you're stupid, and when you're stupid, you're a leftist. You get out into the world a little bit more, and more importantly, you get your first paycheck, and then you stop being a leftist. Oh yeah. As you get your first and then your second and third paycheck, and you see how much taxes takes a bite out of what you've worked so hard to get, then yeah, fuck yeah, you stop being a left-winger and start being conservative. You don't want to be paying so many taxes, and so you want your taxes to be cut. And cutting taxes means that there's going to be less services for the poor. And you start saying to yourself, well, why are these poor people, why are they getting all these services? Why don't they get up off their asses and start working? And soon enough, you start talking like a Republican, for crying out loud. Oh yeah. Yeah, but here comes the key issue, because as you get more conservative and you start to realize that a lot of leftist shit that you'd been brought up to believe was sensible is just so much nonsense, right? As you become more conservative, there is a temptation to slide into being an establishment conservative. And you should avoid this trap at all costs. You have to understand that establishment conservatives, the establishment right, is not about the philosophy of conservatism. No, no, no. It's all about protecting the money of the wealthy. Protecting the money of the wealthy, of the wealthiest of them all, and protecting their position and their political power. That's what establishment right is about. Never confuse the establishment right with the dissident right. Yeah, because the establishment right, the political parties that are conservative, they have not been established in order to protect the working man. They are not there to protect the middle class professional. They are not there to create a society where people are truly free. No, the establishment right, the conservative parties, the Republican Party in the United States, the Tories in the United Kingdom, and so on, those parties were deliberately established to protect the interests of the moneyed, of the elite, of the top of the socioeconomic pyramid. That's why they exist. And you see, so much of their campaign rhetoric and their propaganda is to get people, voters, from the upper middle classes and the middle classes and even the lower classes with this notion, this propaganda, this ridiculousness that whatever is good for the top is going to be good for the rest of the population because it will trickle down somehow. This is bullshit. It's absolute nonsense. What's good for the richest in any given society is not necessarily what's good for the society overall. And certainly not necessarily what's good for the middle classes and the lower middle classes. No. But this has been an effective propaganda that the right-wing parties have promulgated, and which people, a lot of conservatives, perhaps you, they bought into this propaganda hook, line, and sinker. But it is propaganda. You know why the establishment right, the conservative parties in the United States and Great Britain, you know why they don't really raise a fuss about immigration? Yeah? I mean, they talk about it, that it's bad, yeah, but they don't really raise a fuss. Do you know why? Because see, immigration, mass immigration, is good for the rich people. Yeah. The oligarchs in every society in the Western democracies want there to be more mass migrants of every level, because all of these workers will drive down the cost of labor. It's supply and demand. See? The more workers are on offer, the lower the unit price of that labor is going to be. That's why, for instance, in Silicon Valley, you know their number one priority in Washington, insofar as lobbying is concerned, you know what it is? It's to increase H-1B visas. H-1B visas are for skilled workers. They want more H-1B visas so they can import more software engineers from China and India. That's why the conservative parties, they might talk a little bit about how bad immigration is, but they don't really try to stop it, even though they could, because it benefits their masters, the rich guys. The top of the socioeconomic pyramid is not the friend of the middle class, or much less the lower middle classes and the lower working poor. The rich people will never want to be friends with them. No. They will just try to use you, by way of propaganda, by way of making you believe things that you will think that it's a good thing, that it benefits the rich people. Yeah, you'll say to yourself, oh yeah, we should leave capital taxes alone or cut capital gains taxes, because that way it's good for the entrepreneur and for the rich people and they'll provide more jobs. This is propaganda. This is propaganda, and it's been spoon-fed to you. It's been spoon-fed to most people, and it sounds so reasonable, but it's just not true. See? The left-wing economists, they're stupid about a lot of shit, but they're actually right. There is no such thing as trickle-down economics. It does not work. The establishment right is only interested in the welfare and the well-being of the wealthiest in any given society. And they'll say anything to convince other people to vote for them. And they'll say things that seem to attack the upper classes, but really don't. Or let me phrase that. The words might attack them, but the actions speak louder than words, and the actions are all to help the upper classes. And do you know how I learned this? This dichotomy between the dissident right and the establishment right? From the Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet Ugarte. Oh yeah. When Pinochet came to power in 1973, there was a violent overthrow of the Salvador Allende government, which was a Maoist, Leninist kind of government. They were commies and they deserved to be kicked out. They had made a hash of the government. They were just a disaster. And the military came in and took over, right? And Pinochet became president. He was the commander-in-chief of the army. And he wound up being the president of the junta and eventually president of Chile. And the rich people, the establishment right, was behind him. Oh yeah, they were all behind him and everything seemed to be copacetic until 1980, 81. When there was a severe economic downturn, or let me phrase this, there was a banking crisis. There was a whole economic disaster that's far too long and complicated to go into this in this video. But the point was that, see, the rich people, the bank owners who had been in control of large, what was called grupos económicos, economic groups, economic cartels that involved manufacturing, services, and banking sector, all helping one another in these different oligarchic groups, right? Well, they'd been breaking a lot of laws in order to make a lot of money. And what did Pinochet do? He threw them in jail. Yeah, he threw the oligarchs into jail. Oh yeah, in 1981, I was there. I would see on the nightly news, there was this prison called Capuchinos. It was a prison where if you paid X amount of dollars or money per day, you'd have a better living standards. And that's where all the oligarchs were staying, at Capuchinos, yeah? And they were all being prosecuted for financial crimes, yeah? And that's when I realized that, let me phrase it. That's the moment that retrospectively I realized that Pinochet was not an establishment right-wing figure. He was a dissident right-wing figure. He was a populist. He was a working man's right-wing figure. Because after that, the establishment hated Pinochet. Oh yeah, the right-wing establishment in Chile hated Pinochet. And they didn't say shit for many, many years. But once the old man was out of the picture and when he eventually died, oh yeah, the right-wingers, the establishment right, they made it a point to shit all over Pinochet. They hated his guts. And they hated his guts because he put the oligarchs in jail. And they deserved to go to jail. They were corrupt. They were nasty pieces of work. And they had hurt the Chilean economy. They'd crashed it. All so that they could have more money for themselves. They crashed the Chilean economy, and Pinochet rightfully put them in jail for the corruption and the shenanigans that they'd been up to. And because of that, that's when the establishment right came to hate Pinochet, but they couldn't say anything. Not when he was dictator. And they couldn't say anything after the fact because he was so popular among the people. Because the people loved him. The people in Chile loved the old bastard because, yeah, he was, he was shooting commies and all the rest of it, but he actually cared about working class people. He made it a point to make it a fairer, more decent society against the establishment right. The establishment right does not want to make a fair and equitable society. The establishment right does not want the working man to have opportunities to rise up in his station insofar as society and his economic well-being is concerned. The establishment right does not want anything except to protect the economic interests of the oligarchy. In the United States, we don't call them oligarchs, we call them the 1%, but it's the same goddamn thing. They are these rich people who have concentrated enormous wealth in their hands and who maneuver their way into more and more profits by paying off politicians and passing laws that benefit them. This 1%, well, the establishment right, the whole group of them, their magazines, their political action committees, and their think tanks, all of this political band are just lackeys of the 1%. And they don't believe in anything except making that 1% richer. That's all they care about. As you can tell, I am certainly not a member of the establishment right. I despise them. I despise them because I know them, because I grew up in that whole milieu. I know whereof I speak. I grew up and as an adult saw them up close and personal on 2 different countries, in Chile and the United States. And I can tell you they are corrupt and they are despicable. The establishment right, the political parties, the political machinery that's put in place to support these oligarchs, you cannot trust them ever. And don't even think about trusting them. You have to go with the dissidents, with the so-called populists. There is a reason that the mainstream media talks about populism like it's a dirty word. What's the opposite of populism? Elitism. That's the opposite of populism. They hate populism because populism, the well-being of the people, that's the enemy of the well-being of the 1%. That's the enemy of the elite. They hate populism and they will shit on populism. And anybody who claims to be a populist or supports populism. You have to understand that. And so you have to make up your mind. I mean, once you've gotten out of your training wheels, right, and you are no longer an idiot leftist, once you've gotten your first few paychecks and you start to realize that the left is just buffoonish and stupid and that the right is where you should be, well, then you have to choose sides. You are always choosing sides. At first it was left-right, but now that you're in the conservative side of the equation, you got to pick between the establishment right and the dissident right. And it's not an easy choice to make. See, a lot of guys very sensibly decide to be establishment right because they want to advance in their careers. See, the dissident right, the populist side of the equation, you know, you're not going to make a shit ton of money by being on the dissident right. You're not going to be invited to the nice fancy parties, yeah, with the attractive people and the nice ball gowns and the nice suits. No, the dissident right is not that sphere. And if you decide that that's what you want that shiny packaging kind of life, and you want to be a part of that class that helps the 1% become richer, perhaps with illusions of your own that you might one day become part of that 1%, well, then join the establishment right. But know what you're getting into at least. The establishment right, they will never help you or protect you. It's dog eat dog in that world of the establishment right. I know what I'm talking about because I was there. I saw it up close and personal. Your economic fortunes start to deteriorate just a little bit. Yeah, there's the perception that you're going down, and you're going to see all those invitations just disappear like that. And when you rebound and you start making money once again, as happened to me, they call you up. They call you up and, you know, the long lost friend, where have you been? Oh, we've missed you so much. Yeah, we heard you had like some rough patches, but now you seem to be doing great. What's up? Oh, nice car. That's how they come at you. And you want to join that crowd because you figure that that's how you're going to rise up and establish yourself? Fine, I think it's a mistake because you can't trust those sons of bitches. And point of fact, you know, dime con quien andas y te diré quién eres. You know, tell me who you're going with and I'll tell you who you are. An old Spanish saying. You hang out with that crowd long enough and you're going to start acting like them, like assholes, with no loyalty, no consistency, no principles whatsoever. That's the establishment right, because they are the paid lackeys of the top 1%. You join the dissident right, Nobody's going to respect you. Nobody's going to call you up to go to the nice soirees. It's going to be a shitty life. Shitty life in the public sense. Yeah. You might have a great life personally, internally, and materially you could do very well. I mean, frankly, that's my case. Materially, I'm doing all right. I have a rich inner life, and you know, insofar as the things that I'm surrounded myself with, you know, I live the life that I want to. I travel where I want to, do whatever I want to. You know, life is good for me. Yeah. But I don't have any kind of entree into that establishment right, not anymore, because I turned my back on them. I want nothing to do with that. And they don't cotton to people who actively think that they're full of shit. Of course not. I mean, what group of people would? Yeah. You have to understand what you're getting into, but you have to make up your mind like a man. But to circle back to the issue of trust, you can't trust anybody on the establishment right, but you oddly can trust people on the dissident right. See? Because whatever they say, that's what they believe. Because that's the beauty of being on the dissident right. If you're a dissident right-winger, if you are a dissident of any sort, you have the freedom to speak your mind. Somebody says X, and they are going to believe X. They're not kidding around, because they don't need to lie. And I think that that's the great difference between the establishment right and the dissident right. If you're an establishment right, you always are lying. Sometimes to others and sometimes to yourself. But if you're on the dissident right, you are one line.